This is the San Francisco 49ers Report. My name is Chase Sr. No matter where you are or how you're tuned in, as always, I greatly appreciate you for watching the show. And what I want to get into here, the Niners are linked to some of the top trade targets all across the NFL with the trade deadline looming. Obviously, this has to do with San Francisco being very banged up, especially on the defensive side of the ball. What's new? And when I canvass this roster right now, and you think about the injuries suffered to marquee players like Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, these are the top needs for the Niners right now and going into the deadline. Pass rush help. It can be at defensive tackle. It can be at defensive end. Linebacker with the Fred Warner injury. Obviously, pass rush without Nick Bosa. The offensive line. Spencer Burford's practice window was open today, and so that does give the Niners some more depth. They got very scared about having two centers injured on Sunday night, which is why Matt Hennessy and Nick Sakel didn't play at the same time. Now this gives you some more flexibility with Burford being back, but it's not like those options are great options. Although Kyle Shanahan going from less zone runs to more gap and power runs led to a lot of success on the ground for Christian McCaffrey, for this team as a whole, and it allowed this Niners offensive line to play more north-south. And they were able to really put a stamp with their physicality on that game against Atlanta. I'm going to put wide receiver on this list just because there have been so many injuries there. And then cornerback as well, lack of depth and injuries at that position too. Of note, said this a couple of times, but the NFL trade deadline after week 9, going into week 10, the official deadline is November 4th. Now, I've been talking about this for weeks. Shoot, I was talking about this last year when the Raiders were bad because guess what? The Raiders are bad once again. They're a joke of an organization. My favorite trade target for San Francisco, even more than Trey Hendrickson, is Max Crosby. He's a perfect Niner. He'd be a great scheme fit. He's wasting his career with the Raiders. We as football lovers, because I love this game, man, we want to see Max Crosby play meaningful football. He just plays the game the right way. With a lot of effort, fantastic technique, hustle, passion, dedication. He's tough. He's gritty. Number 98, although it's with Mykel Williams right now, but Max Crosby in a Niners uniform would be chills. But according to a report, the Raiders met with Crosby. They informed him they're not going to trade him. And Max Crosby told the Raiders he doesn't want to get traded. Now, he does have Raiders tatted on him, but if I'm Max Crosby, I want to go somewhere where I can actually play in games that matter as far as a playoff race. I want to play in the biggest of games, in the biggest of situations, when the lights are the brightest. But with the Raiders, nobody cares because that football team stinks. So it's unfortunate that he's so loyal to the Raiders. I respect it, but again, me as somebody who loves this game, who really appreciates what he does as a player, I want to see him go somewhere where he can really thrive for a winning team. And he'd be able to do that with the Niners. But it looks as though he is not going to get dealt. As for Trey Hendrickson, there continues to be reports every other day, seemingly, that the Niners are so interested in him. And as of right now, it doesn't look like Cincinnati is going to deal their top pass rusher and the former All-Pro, who has led the NFL in sacks both in 2023 and in 2024. Nobody's had more. Here's what Jeremy Fowler said today on his ESPN article about Hendrickson. He would be far and away the most attractive trade target if Cincinnati entertains a deal. However, a team source told ESPN, as reported on October 14th, that the Bengals have no plan to trade the former All-Pro. The interest will be there regardless. And the San Francisco 49ers in particular consider Hendrickson an ideal fit. The Bengals' record, 3-4, and the team is in the thick of the AFC North race. All the more reason to keep its best defensive player. If they drop the next 2 games, maybe he becomes expendable, but the Bengals beating the Steelers last Thursday, led by Joe Flacco, 41 years old, over the 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers in one of the more entertaining games of the NFL season so far, not good news for all of us who want to see Hendrickson in a Niners uniform. Furthermore, ESPN linking the Niners to all of these players on their top 25 trade targets article. Chris Olave, wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. Jalen Phillips, pass rusher for the Miami Dolphins. Logan Wilson, linebacker for Cincinnati. Arden Key, edge rusher for Tennessee and a former Niner. Kingsley Enagbare, edge rusher kind of dropping out of the rotation for Green Bay. And then Christian Harris, the linebacker for Houston, who is no longer starting, but knows the Niners scheme because he's played a lot under DeMeco Ryans, and he could be a veteran player for San Francisco. So obviously, a lot of interesting names on that list, a lot of players who we have talked about before. If I were to guess right now, I think it's edge rusher. I don't think the Niners go any other position. That includes linebacker, that includes wide receiver, that includes corner, and some of the other positions on this football team. This is also a pretty interesting name and idea that I want to talk about here. Good friend of the show, 49ers Sports Talk, tweeting this out. Interesting little rumbling out there. The 49ers have reached out to the Las Vegas Raiders about potential defensive help per sources. It's not for Max Crosby, not available. The inquiry was about edge rusher Tyree Wilson. And this is intriguing for a couple of reasons, right? So Tyree Wilson, a lot of draft pedigree, an athletic freak at Texas Tech, still is an athletic freak. And in the pre-draft, he had this foot injury that scared a lot of teams away, didn't scare the Raiders away. Now, I didn't love the Raiders' selection of Tyree Wilson at the time because his college career was up and down. I personally like to draft players that high who have done a little bit more at the college level, who aren't just athletic projections, right? Because sometimes the miss rate on those types of players is high. That's ended up being true for Wilson. But talent clearly there, which is why he was a top 10 pick, 7th overall, only in 2023. So he's also still young and moldable. I think that the Niners could develop a player like this. He has great size, 6'6", 263 pounds. The Raiders have used him at defensive end. They've used him at defensive tackle. They have dropped him back in coverage at times. We saw that in the preseason game against the Niners. The Raiders, most likely, because he's been a bust up to this point, will not pick up his fifth-year option. He's been said to be unhappy with the situation with Las Vegas, and he's had a good amount of injuries so far. Hasn't led to him missing a lot of games, but obviously that's notable because of the Niners' history with injuries. Another interesting nugget here with Tyree Wilson. Chris Kocurek, the Niners defensive line coach and one of the top defensive line coaches in the NFL, played his college football at Texas Tech. And if Tyree Wilson doesn't like the situation with the Raiders, he still has a lot of family in Texas, which is where he grew up. That's where he went to high school. He's been said to really want to play in the state of Texas, or at least close to it. Obviously, San Francisco and Santa Clara, far away from Texas. But the familiarity of Chris Kocurek and the talent as far as coaching of Chris Kocurek could make the Niners an intriguing destination for Tyree Wilson. And I can see some comparisons between Wilson and these three players. And these three players on your screen, Chris Kocurek projects who came to the Niners previously labeled as busts. Arden Key was drafted by the Raiders. The Niners signed him in free agency. They turned him into a really good player. And he played defensive end and defensive tackle, and Chris Kocurek really maximized Arden Key, got him on the right track. Charles Omenihu is a player who the Niners traded for at the 2021 trade deadline. Now, he was a later round pick out of Texas by the Houston Texans, but he wasn't really working out with Houston. He comes to the Niners, and he was a really important member of that defensive line the year that they made it to the NFC Championship game in 2021. He played so well for San Francisco, he ended up getting paid by the Kansas City Chiefs. He, like Arden Key, played a little bit of defensive tackle and a little bit of defensive end. Clelin Ferrell was a top 5 pick by the Raiders. That was the John Gruden, Mike Mayock regime. I remember being in Nashville for that draft on Broadway. And when the Raiders drafted Clelin Ferrell, there was an audible gasp from Raiders fans. They couldn't believe it. And Ferrell did not work out with Las Vegas. He comes to the Niners, and I'm not going to quite say he resurrected his career, but he played pretty damn well as a rotational player. Then he went to Washington, played pretty well there. Adam Peters brought him in, and now he's with the Chargers practice squad. He, too, played a little bit of defensive end and a little bit of defensive tackle. That's what Tyree Wilson would be able to do. And so if I'm him, his career hasn't worked out with the Raiders. Sometimes that's where players go for their careers to die. Or if they're young players and they don't work out, they become busts. But we've seen them work out with other organizations. The foundation is there for Tyree Wilson. The skill set is there for Tyree Wilson. I think he needs a better scheme. I think he needs better coaching. And I think the Niners would be able to bring that out of him. His career numbers up to this point. He dealt with that foot injury in 2023, had 3.5 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, 2 TFLs. Last year in 2024, 4.5 sacks, 10 quarterback hits, 6 TFLs. This year, he has 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, 4 TFLs. Again, those numbers aren't crazy, right? But I think there's a better player in there, and I'd bank on Robert Saleh and Chris Kocurek being able to bring that out of him and tapping into that athletic background. Wilson in 2025, how he grades according to Pro Football Focus. Again, there's a foundation to build off of here. Overall PFF grade of 58.2, pass rush grade of 59.1, run defense grade of 52.7, 12 pressures, 2 hits, 6 hurries. And so I put together this trade idea, and I got with Mitchell Renz, the host of the Raiders Report. I'm sending the Raiders a 2026 fourth-round pick, and he said, I think that would do it. The Niners get Tyree Wilson. Another notable here is that Kyle Shanahan has said, we want players who can help us, preferably now and in the future. Well, Tyree Wilson is under contract for 2026, and if you exercise his fifth-year option, 2027 as well. Now, it's a little bit pricier because he's a first-round pick, but it's not as pricey as giving a contract extension to a Trey Hendrickson or trading for another highly priced player who's currently on a contract extension or will be needing one. For Tyree Wilson, you've got him at least for the next 2 years beyond this year on that rookie deal, which is pretty affordable if you think that you can bring the best out of him. And so Tyree Wilson, a name to watch and a name that I'd be interested in going into the deadline. What say you? Would you make that trade if you were the Niners? A simple yes or no. Join the conversation down in the comment section. Do not forget to subscribe. Thanks to everybody for supporting the show. Myself and Chip, we will be live on Thursday, so we'll see you then.